Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Now, we're not using social media to grow our platform, so if you like our work, please subscribe below and don't forget to click on the bell symbol for notification. South Africa. President Trump is properly concerned, and here's why. President Trump's recent postings on Twitter has brought the situation in South Africa to international prominence. So let's unpack what's going on in South Africa, the history of the region, and how it is all relevant to SJW leftist globalist activism today. Although census figures do not exist for the pre-European times in South Africa, the population of the region before first contact with whites was variously estimated at between 500,000 and 750,000 natives. That roughly equates to one person per 4,000 square kilometres of land. In terms of technical evolution, the main tribes in the region are identified generically as Bantus, with subgroups such as and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this properly, the Xhosa, were often nomadic, living in small villages with livelihoods of short-term cropping and small-scale herding supplemented with a hunter-gatherer existence. Perhaps as much as 3,000 years of technical evolution separated Europeans of the day from these tribes. Portuguese explorers were the first Europeans coming through the region as they sought out sea lanes to East Asia, with the Dutch traders establishing a re-victualling station for their ships plying the Javanese spice trade, being the first Europeans to settle in South Africa in the mid-1600s. The Dutch had hoped to purchase local produce from the natives, but as the native population possessed no discernible agriculture, and whatever small herds they possessed were primarily for small-time milk production, it all meant the Dutch needed to establish an agricultural settlement to grow their own crops, which they proceeded to do, and settlers from Europe were brought in for that purpose. The first Dutch explorers recorded they could travel for many days without seeing more than a few local tribespeople who seemed to be permanently at war with neighbouring tribes and villages. That explorers encountered so few natives within the wider Cape area is hardly surprising given the sparse population density. The first Dutch settlers, being devout Protestants and hardy enough to venture into the unknown, were, if anything, industrious. Using the latest techniques in the day on drainage, irrigation and agriculture, along with animal husbandry, they turned a barren area devoid of all agriculture into a vibrant farming region within 20 years. And that's a remarkable feat in anyone's language, and it took a lot of hard work. Attracted by the prosperity of the white settlement, local tribespeople increased in numbers and tried to help themselves to crops and farm animals, which, as you can imagine, caused much disputation. A great deal of the disputation came from the local tribespeople attempting to barter items of no value to the white farmers in return for items of great value to both parties, such as crops and animals. European diseases such as smallpox and other maladies badly affected the local natives at first, but as with other Africans, immunity from these diseases was quickly acquired. Even so, given the large expanse of minimally inhabited areas, the settlers and the natives did not move into anything resembling regular conflict until the late 1700s and early 1800s. Nor was racism, at least as it's defined today, an issue at the time. For example, one of the earlier governors of the area was believed to be 1/4 black. Yet two events running in parallel changed the face of South Africa, and this is pivotal to understanding the history of the region and what ensued. Between 1795 and 1805, the British took over the area as Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Holland and sought to make claim to the Dutch Cape Town colony. To forestall such a development, the British, who were at war with Napoleon at the time, moved in. To keep the local Dutch population on side, the British paid £6 million, a regal sum at the time, to the Dutch locals, but insisted all language was now to be in English, including all legal language in the courts and so on, as well as all senior governmental and commercial posts going to British appointees. The Dutch population, or its leaders, did not like this arrangement and, believing, among other things, the British to be lacking in the Lutheran Calvinist piety that played such a large role in the Dutch farming life, they decided to move north to seek out new farming pastures from the largely uninhabited areas. At around the same time, the highly militaristic Zulu kingdom began to expand southwards towards Cape Town and towards the white areas, and in so doing displaced the various black tribes of the area that in turn moved further south into the new Dutch farming regions and into the British area. Now, where there had been very few blacks, suddenly many hundreds of thousands came south, displaced by the black-on-black Zulu Wars. The black populations displaced by the Zulus entering the white areas did not want to engage in the highly disciplined and intensive agricultural methods of the whites, instead preferring the massively less efficient nomadic open grazing methods for which vast areas of land were required. The hard-working whites had so much, so why would they not share some of it for nothing in return? And if the whites would not just hand it over, then it should be taken by force. No great feat of imagination is required to see the potential for inflammatory outcomes. Inevitably, the Dutch or Boer farmers moved in direct conflict with southward expanding and warlike Zulus, and later the British-Zulu Wars, of which the battles of Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift have been immortalised in film. Once the Zulus had been militarily defeated, the British and Dutch Boers went to war and did so again in 1899 to 1902. Later, the various black tribes were given native self-governing homelands that were separate from the rest of South Africa and as asked for by the natives. And the word for that separateness, or apart in Dutch at least, is called apartheid, and it literally means separateness. As with all things today, apartheid is seen as a wicked, evil, fascist, Nazi, white supremacist plot to keep blacks down and unemployed, poor and oppressed. Let's assume, just for the moment, that that's so. Yet, after 25 years of black rule, with whites having no say in government, black unemployment in South Africa is still hovering at 45% or more. Violent black deaths at the hands of other blacks are worse than it has ever been. Black poverty is worse than it was under white government. And all cities now have major no-go zones of violence, even in daytime, something that was unheard of under white government. Similarly, jobs for blacks that were poorly paid under apartheid are still poorly paid today. The lot of the blacks hasn't really changed. Other than a small elite of monumentally corrupt and some say utterly incompetent black leaders, the position of the average black citizen in South Africa may be decidedly worse now than it was under white rule, and it's certainly no better. What should these black South African leaders do? Admit that they have been handed for free a very wealthy, superbly administered nation, and they have horribly, horribly squandered this most golden opportunity and the best opportunity they will ever have? Or do they blame others and say to those damn fascist whites, if we just take that last little bit the whites have left, such as their farms, then paradise will be ours? It's also worth noting that since apartheid was started, the black population of South Africa rose from around 7.5 million to 38 million at the end of apartheid, when black government was granted. This is a staggering population increase that achieved by blacks procreating at the rate of 4.5 children per woman, and blacks from neighbouring black-run failed states coming into prosperous white-run South Africa looking for work. The only other prosperous African nation at the time was the white-run Rhodesia, which, as we all know, became Zimbabwe and is now itself a basket case. Now, if apartheid was so bad, why was it that blacks from all over Africa wanted to come to white-run South Africa? And why were local black South African women procreating at such an astonishing rate if the conditions were so bad? Since black government, the black population of South Africa has grown by more than 12 million, placing them into the Malthusian trap where population growth handily outstrips any increase in wealth. Of the total population today, more than 8 million young men between the ages of 17 and 29 years roam the streets, with more than half of them being unemployed and more than 3/4 of them having no discernible skills. Black kids who wouldn't make it into middle school are being affirmative actioned through college with soft sociology degrees, where they are taught to hate whites with extreme prejudice. How this is or will help South Africa in the future is anybody's guess. Everything material you see in South Africa has been built and developed by whites and whites alone. Every building, every port, every farm, every dam, every road, every rail line, every mine and every power station is created, designed, conceived and built by whites. Blacks were in South Africa in small numbers until the early 1800s, when whites had been working the land and developing the region for more than 150 years. The murdering of white farmers by blacks to steal white-owned farmland is just another stepping stone towards a basket case failed state economics. The white farms once stolen will either be left fallow or mismanaged into the ground. Keep in mind that blacks are wanting to take something that was never theirs to begin with. They created and built nothing of what we see in South Africa today. If this murdering of farmers was happening to black farmers, the international media outcry would be a crescendo. Yet when white farmers are murdered and tortured, brutally tortured, the globalist media as one appear to gloat in delight. They say nothing, or they deny it's happening, with that teenage SJW Marxist speak the mainstream media is so famous for today. Maybe it was morally right to end apartheid and hand power to what has turned out to be a bunch of corrupt thugs. And as South Africa slips into being just one more African failed basket case state, we can ask ourselves, is the road to hell paved with good intentions? You've been with Tacitus Today, your Pushback channel. All our essays are available in ebook or printed book format. Thank you for listening.